My name is Bobby. Sorry, my name is Bobby Bissold. I'm with Rivers Run Through Us. We walked the length of the Santa Fe River in 2012 from the upper watershed to the Rio Grande in 5 consecutive days camping along the way. We had to get permission from lots of entities, two pueblos, the city, and so on and so forth. So, and that's continued to be, I have continued to be an advocate for water and working with the collaborative for a number of years. Okay.
Amy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Amy Ewing. I'm a hydrogeologist. I work at Hazen and Sawyer. And I know some of you from, I used to work at Daniel B. Stevens. I worked there about 20 years. And I've done a lot of work around the state, presently doing a lot of work for the city of Santa Fe.
Okay. Ryan?
Technical assistance provider for the Southwest Environmental Finance Center based out of UNM, helping out Santa Fe, trying to figure out long-term funding strategies for water and wastewater projects. So nice to meet you all.
Thanks. Zoe, and thank you for being here.
Zoe Isaacson, River and Watershed Manager for the city of Santa Fe.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
Francesca.
Hello, Francesca Shirley. I'm with the City of Santa Fe. I'm a water resources coordinator in the Water Division of Public Utilities.
Aaron, one of my favorite people. How you doing?
Okay, great. Good to see you, Carl, everybody. My name is Erin English. I'm a practice lead and water engineer with Biohabitats, and I'll be talking today about some ecological engineering strategies around treatment wetlands. I'm here in Santa Fe.
Okay, Haley.
Hi, everyone. Haley Hejik with the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. We're based out of UNM, but we're all grant funded, so EPA, NMED. If you've ever heard of Rural Water, RCAC in New Mexico, those are also technical assistance providers, and we do similar work to them.
Heather.
Everybody, Heather Himmelberger. I'm the director of the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, and I remember Amy and I worked together on a project like a million years ago, back when you were with DB Stevens. So good to see you again. And we're here helping Santa Fe under our bipartisan infrastructure law assistance award that we received from EPA. So we're happy to be here and help however we can.
Mr. Me. Turn on, you're muted.
Woodfield Village Association, the Sequia Association, the Well Owners Association, and it's William Me.
Maury, you really don't need an introduction, but please do.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. Maury Hensley, Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association.
Darren? Okay, Darren's microphone isn't working. He is from Lavahala, and he's involved in a whole lot of water issues and is a new member of the Water Policy Advisory Committee for the county. And Mr. Harden, Miss Harden, I'm embarrassed.
Yes, I'm Andrew Harden here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right, yeah, I'm a planner in Santa Fe County. I'll be working on water and wastewater projects. I'm relatively new, but I'm really looking forward to getting into it.
Cool. Darren, did we get anything solved with you? Or are you still out? Okay, well, considering John hasn't joined us, I don't hope you don't mind, Heather, but we may jump into funding right off. And I do want to do a little bit of introduction because it was early on in my tenure with the city of Santa Fe that I got in touch with the folks at Southwest Environmental Finance Center. And I can tell you that relationship has been extremely beneficial on a whole bunch of different levels. And Heather certainly has led the way. And I have to ask her how her almost 2-year-old grandson is doing now. So she is quite proud of the young man.
Yeah, interesting. Like you will note, I am now actually in Baltimore. I had
Oh,
to come
wow.
because my son-in-law is leaving for London tonight, and so I'm here to get the baby to and from daycare, and he's just the joy of my life at the moment. Just love to be here with him, so I'm enjoying that. But he can't get to and from daycare with his mom, who's a resident right now in medicine. So we're
Oh,
here to
wow.
get him to and from school and take care of him before his mom gets home and all that. So I'm gonna get to have fun for a week. So
Cool.
good times for me.
Okay.
So on to the matter at hand. There were two issues that you asked me to touch on. And I wanted to touch on both. And I guess I'll touch on the potential collaboration first. So as many of you know, or all of you probably know, City of Santa Fe and the County of Santa Fe both have some amount of water infrastructure, but they're separate entities, but very intertwined entities. And we have always been big proponents of collaboration in whatever way feels best to the entities involved, and collaboration, especially from the standpoint of how governments who are maybe disparate, separate units, how they can better function singularly, because water is really not an issue that can be parsed out and, this is Santa Fe City, this is Santa Fe County. It just doesn't work like that. So water moves, changes, it crosses boundaries, it does all those things. And if any of you are familiar with Albuquerque before they became the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Utility Authority, it used to be the city of Albuquerque owned the water utility, and then they served the county of Bernalillo. So the county of Bernalillo didn't have a lot of input into where lines were running or how water, wastewater was done. And it was a constant source of tension. Now it's different from Santa Fe County. Santa Fe County does have some water infrastructure that it manages, whereas Bernalillo County did not. So they were being served, but they didn't really actually have any infrastructure other than some stormwater infrastructure. So it's been, gosh, I'm trying to think, maybe about 2010-ish. I can't even remember exactly when the legislature said, we're not going to do this anymore. You guys have to cooperate. You're going to form this alliance or this authority that's going to be the city and the county cooperating together. And I think there were those like myself who were just thrilled, thought the legislation was fantastic. There were some people within the city who were absolutely adamantly opposed. And there were some legislators around the Albuquerque area that were pretty opposed, but a lot of other people thought it was great. After they got the initial shock of, we have to do this and we don't want to, it became, I think, probably the most powerful thing they could have ever created. And I don't think there's any naysayers anymore, at least not that I've seen, because it turned out to be the best thing that ever could have happened to water in the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County area. It gets to be managed as a whole for the benefit of both the county and the city equally, so that it's not a matter of one part or another part gets more or less treatment. Everybody is equal. The board is made up of equal number of Bernalillo County members and Albuquerque city members, and then it has the mayor who kind of sits on as I think breaks the ties or that kind of thing. But it also gave the chance to keep the emphasis just on water. So when it was a city entity, it kind of got molded a bit more by what the city's priorities were. And there was a little bit of flux between what the engineers did in the water world. Sometimes that crossed over into other parts of the city. There was more potential for the priorities to shift based on city desires, but as a just water entity, that doesn't happen because the entire focus of the water system is water. So I think what they've been able to do is nothing short of amazing, of just how they've been better able to manage the overall resources, and that allowed them to go for the surface water treatment plant that helped create some reliability. They've upgraded the wastewater treatment plant. They've instituted asset management programs so that if you could have seen what they were like before they started asset management compared to now, it's just night and day. They were a completely reactive entity that reacted to every problem. The wastewater treatment plant was failing. They were, getting fined. There were just issues galore. There were fights between the city and the county all the time. So what these sort of entities that are combined, and I'm not trying to say that you have to be exactly like ABCWA or anything like that. I mean, everybody needs to design
Heather,
what fits
can I
them.
interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
I think asset management to me is a really important part of this, and I think it would be helpful if you could explain that to everybody.
Oh, sure. So asset management is meant to be a way to meet the customer desired level of service at the lowest overall life cycle cost. So you're talking about defining what you want your utility to do. So what do your customers want? What kind of service are they looking for? And then how can you manage your assets over their whole life in the most efficient way possible to deliver that service? So it requires you to inventory all your assets, map all your assets, where they all are, gather data about those assets, then establish your level of service goals, like what you actually want to do. And this means written goals that you can measure against. So I would say something like, respond to customer complaints within 1 business day, 95% of the time, something like that, that would be very measurable. And then if I didn't meet those goals, I could see what happened. What do I need to do? Is it lack of staff or lack of training or something like that? And then you want to look at your risk. So figuring out which assets are likely to fail. And if they do, what is the consequence? And you multiply the 2 scores together, and that gives you a risk. And what you're trying to do is spend your money on higher risk assets, not lower risk assets. So every dollar I spend on a lower risk asset doesn't change my risk profile at all. Every dollar I spend on a higher risk profile drives that risk down, which means I have a less risky facility. The more reduced the risk is, the less bad things are going to happen. So then we're not going to have catastrophic failures. We're not going to have, these huge bad events happening. We're going to reduce costs, because anytime a catastrophic failure happens, it costs way more than a planned event. So we want to replace things in a planned manner, not a reactive. So for example, we don't want a storage tank to fall over. That would be horrible. We would much prefer to fix that tank, keep it in service, make sure it works, before something bad happens. So we're going to monitor the tank, we're going to clean it, we're going to rehab it, whatever we need to do, or replace it if that's necessary, to keep it from actually failing and causing these horrible things. And then in the next part, we're thinking of like our whole life cycle of our assets. And what I always like to tell people is the asset's life starts in planning. It doesn't start when the keys are given to you to operate it, which is when most people think, oh, that's when the asset starts. I'm given the keys, I have to operate it. No, it starts in planning, because that's the time you can do, you can let the sort of sky's the limit of what you're going to do, because it doesn't cost you anything to make changes. So as I'm thinking through, what alternative do I want? Like for the Santa Fe wastewater plant, what treatment technology do I want? Where do I want to put it? Do I want to rehab or replace? Do I want to do a mix of rehab, replace? All of those things come up under planning and design when it's only on paper and you're not building anything. By the time you get the keys, it's too late. You've got whatever you've got. So we want to think about the entire life cycle and how we can intervene at every point along the way to have the most efficient, effective process we could possibly have. And then finally, the last part is thinking about the money. So we want to make sure we have enough money to run the facilities from, the time we get them until we have to retire them. And that's actually ties right back into the idea of some sort of collaborative entity, because you can reduce costs if you can get rid of some of the double administrative burden of having 2 entities running stuff. You can have a more efficient operation if you're thinking holistically about the whole area instead of just parts of the area. So that gives you opportunities to really affect that long-term funding. And plus it gives you sort of a bigger customer base because now it's the whole city and county together, excuse me, together. So asset management is just a hugely beneficial process for utilities to go through. And it takes a while to implement. I would say probably took Albuquerque. Excuse me, I've been recovering from a cold for about 3 weeks. Probably took them about 3 weeks. I mean, I'm sorry, 10 years to really get to the point of a very, very good implementation of asset management. And I think, you know, certainly there's improvements they can make. But we can point to very significant improvements that they've had and cost savings. We worked with them on some pipe breaks a long time ago and improving how they were replacing water pipes. And in 5 years, they were able to cut the break rate by 45%, not by spending more money, but by spending the money they had differently. And the $9 million cost savings that they had from that could be spent on other things. So even in a big utility like Albuquerque, $9 million is real money. So we figured out the 45% reduction over that 5 years was, you know, like $9 million worth of stuff that they could do. So they use that money for other things. So it's never, or not usually ever, about reducing rates. It's about, like, what are all the things we can't do because we don't have the money and the time. So now that I have $9 million in time, I can go do something else. So they fixed their broken meters. They had 5,000 broken meters, and they reduced that down to a couple hundred meters that were not working. And that sort of just bounces along because every month there's always going to be some broken meters. But that's a manageable amount of broken meters. So they got more revenue because they fixed the meters. And then they were able to move into like a valve exercising program, which they didn't have before either. And that will keep their valves working better. So when you do an asset management program, it really helps improve how a system operates, how it's managed, you know, how it's financed, all those things start to take hold when you have a really good asset management program. And, you know, they had little incremental wins along the way, but now that they've got this robust program running, they have a lot of things that they can point to that have really helped, you know, how they manage and operate that utility. But I don't think they would have been as successful. I really, really don't, if they hadn't been the standalone city county authority. I think that really gave them the power to focus on the water only, because the authority doesn't do anything else but, you know, water, wastewater, and a little bit of stormwater. So there isn't anything else that's going to pull their attention this way or that way or whatever. So it just gives them that chance to really focus on the utility, and kind of gives you a more cohesive water governance. Again, like reduces the administrative burden because you're not duplicating efforts. So like water people here and water people there, you can put them together. And having the funds dedicated solely to water. And sometimes it kind of opens up some more independent thinking about the water that isn't tied to like city or county government. So I think there's a huge benefit to be had if the city and county can find a way to really work together in, again, whatever way makes the most sense, whether that's an authority structure or some other structure. Because there are certainly other ways the city and county can collaborate, but it's something that I've recommended for years. Anytime I've ever had a chance to talk to city and county people, I always tell them the same thing. You know, I think there's a great opportunity there. If there's, you know, willingness and interest in collaboration, there's a lot to be gained from the two entities, you know, kind of working together on water issues. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions or comments on that part of things, you know, this idea of a city-county collaboration.
Heather, one of my questions is, in terms of accessing funding, are there differences between what the city can access and what the county can access?
I would say probably not significant ones because they're both municipal type entities. So I think for the most part, it wouldn't be different. Now, there may be benefits to going in as a regional entity where you might get more points on an application or something, or favorable treatment because the state really wants to see regional cooperation. So there may be opportunities there. But I wouldn't want to imply that you're opening up a whole bunch more sources of funding, because I don't really think that's true, because the city and the county are already kind of eligible entities under a lot of different programs, and probably under the same programs. But I think, again, there are some cases where it'd be favorably viewed that the city and county are collaborating, and maybe there'd be some chance for like extra points to rise your application a bit higher or something like that.
I was just wondering if there's different funding sources that are separate. They're not.
No, there's not one that says like, oh, if you're regional, you get to come over here. At this point, we don't have anything like that where there's like dedicated funding to a regional entity. But again, like going for the same source, some of them are competitive. And if they see that you're doing something that's very favorable, in a regional sense, they might give you more points or, higher priority rating or something like that.
Any other questions from the folks?
Yeah, it looks like we have a question
Darren's.
from Darren.
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I guess the question is, what can we look at in the existing joint relationships we have with the city and county of Santa Fe in particular to point to either some sort of progress toward all this mutual benefit or towards gaps where we can focus on maybe having this more holistic approach that you're talking about. And I put it in the chat, but I think I misguided it. My big question is, or maybe comment, is that it's very important to differentiate holistic asset and resource management from centralized control of infrastructure, particularly, in our local geography and cultural landscape. So I'm wondering, more particularly, I know of the two, like say the Buckman board, I guess it is, that the city and county both populate together and manage together. And maybe there's some data or information there we could look at towards looking at success since the time it's existed, or gaps that places where we lost opportunities and need to exploit them, right? So there's that. And then I guess there do exist some other joint agreements, particularly with regard to this sort of, I guess, dormant return flow credit paper imaginary pipeline, how that's ever going to work out. But there is a framework for a joint city-county, I guess, contract, both for the management of it and also for a joint management of a lower Santa Fe River mitigation program for that. So because of your expertise, I guess, Heather, I'm really curious to know about the benefits from the perspectives of the acequias downstream on the Rio Grande, not on the Santa Fe River, but maybe in Corrales, Los Ranchos, and there, to see how, what do we have to indicate the benefits, or maybe, again, some gaps or opportunities to improve with regard to traditional communities in Acequia on the Rio Grande there that we might apply to the Santa Fe River up here.
Yeah, and I think there's certainly, when you're looking at designing some kind of regional cooperation, it's really up to the entities to decide what to design and how to design it. So if the entities want to kind of expand what the purview is going to be and include acequias and other water users, because you're right, there is a big difference between the water resources themselves and how they're used and the infrastructure. Two things that are intertwined, but they're not the same thing. So the infrastructure is how we move the water to where we want it. So we're going to have pipes and tanks and wells and treatment and, you know, all those things to get water from point A to point B and treat it and, you know, make it clean before we discharge it or make it clean before we drink it. So there's one side of it is definitely that infrastructure. The other side of it is all of the resources that kind of work in concert. So rivers and groundwater and, you know, acequias and all these things are working together for whatever those water resources are in the area. And they are two sort of different things. I'd say the easier side, and easier in quotes, is the infrastructure side because there's more natural connections between the city and the county on the infrastructure side. But probably the bigger benefit is to make it bigger along the water resources side, because then you're taking the whole area into account and trying to figure out how to work together to address those resources that serve the entire area, whether that's, you know, agriculture or drinking or whatever. So it's really up to entities to design how they want it to look. And if that is going to look more water resources and infrastructure combined, or one or the other or both. And certainly encourage the group to think about, you know, how could it be designed so that it's both, that it could address water resources as well as the infrastructure. Because again, you're right, they are two different things. And they do, you know, serve kind of two different purposes. But again, very interrelated. You know, one is definitely going to affect the other because how you use the water resources will then, you know, build into how that infrastructure is designed and that kind of stuff.
Can I maybe let's shift it to, because say from the Santa Fe County perspective, we really, I think, and maybe this collaborative has been very focused on the interrelationship between the any hope for a living river and the, say, health of the wastewater treatment plant or plants, be it the Quill plant or the Paseo Real plant, and how they contribute to both the aquifer, say in Cieneguilla and La Cienega, and then to the stream generally as it flows all the way through La Ojada and onward. But I keep hearing sort of ethereally about Albuquerque's success in treating and reusing the wastewater there, especially just in terms of the sheer volume of it that happens by serving the metropolitan area. And I'm wondering if we're so close. I very infrequently hear about lessons learned or opportunities that our neighbors are finding out about just right down the road here, and that we could be learning from. I know there's one kind of potable reuse attempt plant, but that still may be in experimental phases and not sure. But maybe that's something that is there anything that's like, hey, you guys just didn't hear about it? This are the great benefits that are occurring so close to you. Pay attention.
Yeah, there are definitely lessons
What are we
learned.
missing?
Yeah, there's definitely lessons learned, and I think Cloudcroft was our example of a city that tried to do toilet to tap, which God knows why anybody ever named it that to begin with, because that's like just asking for trouble. But they were trying to do a direct potable reuse, and I don't know if they ever even got the thing up and running, but the regulations got so tough where, okay, you can only do 10% of your water and you have to do this and have to do that. It just got to be almost impossible for them to do it. What Albuquerque's been doing is reuse for like irrigation purposes and industrial purposes. A lot of places, not just Albuquerque, but other places have found that, okay, if you're going to make reuse water, it is more expensive than the wastewater effluent because you have to do that extra treatment to make it reuse quality. So then who wants to use that water? Who's going to pay for it? You know, how are you going to make those sort of arrangements? And I know that last I heard they were using a lot of water in city parks. So that's a definite benefit because they're not using, you know, direct potable water on the parks. But it maybe wasn't exactly what they had intended when they first started that process. And I think there's a couple of industries that are using the water. So it wasn't, as far as I can tell, maybe exactly what what they had in mind for the potable or for that reuse water when they first started, but the realities of the situation changed kind of how they were using it. And other cities have had some of the similar experiences. Like we've been working with a utility in Hawaii, actually, and there's a wet side and a dry side of the island. And on the dry side, they thought they could do potable reuse or some type of reuse. And they're not finding any takers who want the water. So they haven't even built the plant yet because they can't find a use for the water afterwards. So right now it's still just being discharged into the ocean instead of being reused, but that's their plan. So it has, sort of had hit and misses at different places, but I think there are definite lessons learned from across the US, for people who tried it. But another thing they're doing, and I can't remember if Santa Fe is doing this as well, they're doing aquifer storage and recharge. So they do have a process of, is Santa Fe doing that also?
Not currently, but it's
Okay.
something that we're definitely interested in exploring.
So that's something that's sort of happening across the country again in various places. They're doing different ways in different places. And I think
I
there's
heard there is one project there in Albuquerque, that's a aquifer recharge, I guess, and I can't remember the name of it, que como Davis Canyon or something like this.
Bear Canyon.
Yeah, Pozo
No.
Canyon or
What
Bear
is it?
Canyon.
Albuquerque has
There
two
you go.
projects.
Okay.
2 projects.
Okay.
in Albuquerque.
So I think there's a lot of lessons learned again on that side of things of like, is that feasible? How to do it? Can you do it with wastewater, reuse water? All these different kinds of questions that I think could be explored and definitely want to learn from others who are doing things. There's a lot of utilities like Denver Water is always doing interesting things in El Paso. And so there's a lot of places that can bring, lessons learned to this area of like some unique things they've done to address, water shortages and drought and various things like that I think Santa Fe could learn a lot from. You don't have to be the experimenters. You can be on the backside kind of looking at, well, which one would work best for us? And, let the others experiment, and then you just take the data in and figure out, what's going to work best. And then somebody I know put in that they recently heard ABQ is producing and giving away sludge-based compost for free. I didn't know they were doing it again, but they had done it for a while and they sold it for a while. There were some local, what do you call them? Flower stores, Nurseries, thank you. Couldn't come up with the word. There were some local nurseries that aren't in business anymore, but they used to sell Albuquerque sludge, like compost in a bag. And then they stopped selling it, I know, for a while. And then they were using it on their own parks and like city sites, county sites, that kind of thing. So I hadn't heard that they were giving it away for free, but it doesn't surprise me because I know they have a big compost facility that they've been using for sludge and like yard waste, that type of thing. That I've been to their compost facility, but it's been a long time ago. But it was a pretty big facility. Now, the one catch is going to be, we're starting to find PFAS, the forever chemical, in sludge. And that is opening up a can of worms like nobody's business. And there are some places already that have such high PFAS that they're not allowing it to be used on agricultural land at all. So like Florida has some of those cases where they're trying to figure out how to destroy PFAS in the sludge because they've been land applying it, but they're not going to be allowed to land apply it anymore because the PFAS is so high. I don't know if Albuquerque has tested their sludge for PFAS yet, or if they would, if it would be there, but that's going to put a wrinkle in all this mess, because if it turns out there's PFAS at a high level in the sludge, they're probably going to have to change something, destroy the PFAS first, or how they use it. I mean, I don't know what all is going to happen, but that's just something to keep your eye on. It's not regulated yet, but it's on the horizon. Is become a big issue is the whole PFAS concentration in sludge and biosolids. So just keep your eyes out on that. because that could be an issue for Albuquerque or Santa Fe, you know, going forward, depending on what you guys want to do with your sludge.
Okay.
Other questions about that coordination, collaboration? And again, I think there's lots of models. It's not like there's only one model that can work. There are lots of models that can work. And the best model is one that gets that collaboration as much as possible to occur, because you are one water, whether the jurisdictional boundaries want to admit that or not, it is one area with one water. I mean, it's not like the city kind of can put a little ring around the groundwater and say, well, you don't go into the county. You know, it just doesn't work like that. So the more cooperation there can be and the more collaboration there can be, I think, you know, that's the better way to go, is collaboration and cooperation and ways to work together.
We
So I
all
would
agree.
try to encourage it as much as possible.
Bobby?
I'd like to ask a question. So, so how does the asset management take into account the value, the ecosystem value of a river? The riparian, how does that figure
Well,
into the?
We actually have been sort of working on bringing green infrastructure into gray assets. So we differentiate green and gray assets. So gray assets are all the man-made stuff: concrete, steel, pipe, tanks, all of that stuff that we create and we put in the ground. Green assets are those things that either are already naturally occurring and we're just using them, or we have engineered them to work like nature. So we put in soils and plants because we want them to do a certain thing. And I think somebody mentioned wetland treatment. That's basically green infrastructure. So we're taking plants and trying to mimic nature's capability of removing contaminants, but we're trying to choose particular plants in particular ways and sizes to make them function the way we want to. So a riparian area, a forest, any of that stuff, those are like natural assets, but we would classify them as green. And we've been arguing that asset management needs to include the green assets as well as the gray. And you have to think about what are the green assets that make up your system. So for example, if you discharge to a river, that's an asset to you, because you're using that river to convey the wastewater away and take it somewhere else. Or if you have like a buffer area that is protecting your source water, for example, like a forested or a riparian buffer area, that's an asset to you because it's helping you protect your source. So there can also be green assets associated with stormwater as well, to either capture or treat stormwater. And we want to identify what all those assets are and value them in some way. And it gets tricky. You know, how do you value a forest that you didn't buy? It's just there and you're taking advantage of it, or a river that's just there and you're using it. But we're involved in a Water Research Foundation project right now that just started, or it's just kicking off actually, that's looking at that, like the value of watershed scale infrastructure, green infrastructure. So we're working with a couple of economists organizations where they're trying to figure that out, of how do you value it? Is it, you know, the amount of acreage? Is it the amount of trees? You know, is it the job it does? So I'd say we're not quite there yet, but we're heading in that direction of having people not just look at the gray assets, but look at the green ones too, and consider that part of the whole system that has to work together. Because you need everything working in concert. Because let's look at Ruidoso with the fires that they've just had. The fact that those forests burned are going to have a significant impact on the water system going forward. So understanding that there is a relationship there, you know, that's important. And understanding like the water system may have a role in protecting that green asset, that forest or that river or whatever. You know, I think we tend to think of them as very separate, like the water systems don't think about forests and rivers and things like that because we're over here and they're over there. But we've been trying to encourage people to think of it much more holistically because it's intertwined. Whether we want to think about it that way or not, they do have impacts on each other. And we need to think of them as assets. So again, I wouldn't say that we have great information yet on how to value those assets, but we're working towards that kind of thing. And they should at least be considered in a qualitative way until we have a better way to quantify the value of those things, because they are super, super important to, you know, to the whole water picture in the whole area and the infrastructure itself.
We've had a couple of people join us, and I know Paul Choman is on the call, and I'd like him to kind of introduce himself. And there's a phone number I'm not familiar with. Paul, you want to introduce yourself? Okay. How about the phone number?
That's my I guess microphone there, Carl.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. All right. Heather, one of the questions, I guess it's a question. Maury, did you have a question?
Sure, I can, it might be quick, but I was curious. I'm not as familiar with the Albuquerque Bernalillo system, but I was wondering if you've seen any more effective synergy between city and county departments within those systems. You know, I know that it's hard to put water all in one department itself. And so has that asset management system helped inter-entity departments collaborate or be on the same
all of the water
page better?
moved out of the city. So the city doesn't have any more water stuff, theoretically anyway. Like AMAFCA is a little bit different. AMAFCA keeps the stormwater. And they're not really a city entity. They're like a quasi-governmental sort of thing. So there's stormwater under AMAFCA. All the drinking water and wastewater moved under the authority. So it moved out of the city. So they're fairly independent from the city now. So I don't know if it changed cooperation between the city and the county in other ways other than the water. They were forced to cooperate because now the city and the county are kind of running this independent authority separately from either the city or the county. So the city and county have members on the board. So there's city councilors and county commissioners on the board who kind of make the final decisions, but by and large, it operates pretty independently of the city or the county. So I'm not sure that I've seen necessarily tons more cooperation, maybe because of the structure where it's kind of just pulled all out of the city.
I think my question was more like how stormwater, wastewater, drinking water, and other maybe green assets like open space, is there potential in a forward-thinking asset management plan for those pieces of water to collaborate more effectively, whether or not it's within city or county or
Yes,
separate
absolutely.
entity?
And we're actually working with Bernalillo County right now on looking at some of their green infrastructure. So Bernalillo County has quite a bit of green infrastructure they're doing kind of independently of the Albuquerque Authority to address stormwater issues in the county. And you know, you can create any kind of cooperative structure that really helps you think through water, wastewater, stormwater. I think the stormwater is probably the area that's the least cohesive because it's more diffuse. Like the authority was set up really with drinking water and wastewater in mind, not so much stormwater. So in stormwater, you have that whole area has like SCAFCA, AMAFCA, the county, the city, and a bunch of other entities. So when they had that MS4 permit, which kind of describes how stormwater is going to be done in that area, there's a lot of entities who are party to that agreement. So there's probably, you know, that MS4 permit gives cooperation because they all have to kind of work together to meet, you know, their permit obligations. But that is definitely more disparate, more, you know, into like different pieces in different places than the drinking water and the wastewater. The drinking water, wastewater are very coordinated. The stormwater much less so, because again, you have all these different people doing different parts. So you've got like the big arroyos being controlled by a MAFCA or SCAFCA, depending exactly where you are. And then you have, you know, this diffuse green infrastructure that the county is doing. I don't know if the city's doing a whole lot of green infrastructure, but the county definitely is doing like rain gardens and bioswales and that kind of thing. So again, the way you design yours, your idea of cooperation can include stormwater a lot more intimately than I think the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County does, because it's definitely not a big part of the ABCWA. They don't have a lot to do with stormwater. I think they manage a few stormwater pipes or something, but generally speaking, they don't do a lot with stormwater. It's mostly drinking water and wastewater.
Okay, any other
Yeah.
questions?
I have another comment. I have a little bit of a comment. So, I feel very suspicious with the statement that working on an economic value of a forest, of a river, of a, you know, the riparian, because it's like putting a value on, you know, an economic value on your grandson, for example, or on my grandchildren, or on, you know, something that is as valuable as that. You really cannot put in, you know, create that, because there are so many levels. You know, with the, you know, the forest and the riparian, you know, there's also, how do you put a value on the fact that that is something that feeds our spirit? You know, you can't, you know, so how in the world will that happen in a
That is for
really
the
valuable
economists to
way?
worry about at this point with the study. That is definitely not my end of the study. My end of the study is more the asset management side of bringing it together with asset management. But we have several economists, and I don't know precisely what they have in mind for, you know, how to layer those things. I mean, I agree with you that it's a hard thing to do, but it's necessary so that we can value it at all. Because right now the problem is it's not being valued much at all. So we're not putting the idea of like, okay, let's say Ruidoso, just to pick on them for the moment. Ruidoso again is being massively affected by these fires, and this water utilities down there are being affected. If they saw a value to that forest of, let's say $10 billion, just to pick a number, like this forest is worth $10 billion. And if we lose it, it's going to create this kind of havoc. So maybe you want to put some money towards forest restoration, even though that's not a normal water system thing to do. But if you see a value, that can allow you to make an investment, where if you don't see a value at all, you're not going to make that investment. So I don't think there's, you know, any chance it's going to be a perfect way to put value on these things. But once we put some value on it, it allows us to make different choices and value those assets that maybe we're not valuing much at all. We're not viewing them as assets for us. So, you know, we'll replace a pipe, we'll replace a tank. We can understand that. Like as engineers, that makes sense. The pipe gets holes in it, we have to put a new one in, or the pipe cracks, we have to put a new one in. But we don't get the same sort of concept of like this forest, which is worth gobs to us. Like we should do something, you know, whatever that is, you know, control burns or taking out, you know, debris, whatever the stuff is. We should invest in that, because that's an asset for us too. It's kind of helping us change our way we think about those assets, that yes, they definitely have more value to us. And we talk about that with green assets a lot, is gray assets basically have one function. So if you have a pipe, it's got one function. It's moving water from here to there. That's it. There's no other, nothing else it's trying to do. It's not trying to look beautiful. It's not trying to make housing values higher. It's not trying to do anything else. It's just moving water. Green assets, that's not the same thing, because we can hike in a forest, which is totally separate from any water type of thing, and get a value from that. And we can use it for, you know, heat mitigation, and we can use it for cleaning the air. There's all these other things that green infrastructure does that gray does not. So that does make it harder to value green because it has other functions that gray doesn't. But if we try to put some value in some way on those other functions and what it's worth, it will help us invest in it. And I'm not entirely sure how the economists plan on doing it, but we've got a bunch of them on this project. So, and they're running the project. We're just one of those subs. So we'll see what they can come up with.
Heather, I have a final question, and it's a big one. I think Chris will have to help out with this one. But where do we get $300 million to put in a new wastewater treatment plant?
So I was going to share my screen here for a second to give you sort of the good, bad, and ugly about it. So is my screen sharing?
Yes.
You should be seeing like a list of funding. So this is not an entirely complete list. But one of the things you will notice is there are lots of different places to get money. So there's the New Mexico Finance Authority, the New Mexico Environment Department, the US EPA, the US Rural Development Agency, they're under USDA, the New Mexico Department of Finance Administration, DFA. We have the Economic Development Administration. We have the, what is this? The U.S. Department of the Interior, Bureau of Reclamation has several sources. North American Development Bank, which wouldn't affect Santa Fe because you guys are too far away from the border, but they're in New Mexico. The Small Business Administration, Live Oak Bank, which is like a private lender. And we're missing about 3 or 4 funding sources that came into being, like the New Mexico Match Fund, for example, that's fairly new. We don't have that on here yet. There's some, if you get into emergencies, like FEMA ends up spending a lot of money on water and wastewater infrastructure. If like in Ruidoso, there's going to be a lot of FEMA money pouring into the water, wastewater there, and they're not on here. The kind of the one message is there's lots of different sources and none of these is going to be able to write you a check for $300 million. Because it's going to be above the level of any of these agencies. Because what you're talking about is such a huge amount of money. So it will take combining sources together. So we're going to have, we'll say the state revolving fund mixed with maybe a congressional directed spending, which is not on here. And that's where you go directly to Congress and ask them for money. And they give you like 80% grant to do that. So you can potentially get a bunch of money that way. There's the WIFIA fund. I think WIFIA is on here. WIFIA is the Water Infrastructure Finance crap. I forget what the other IA stands for. It's WIFIA, but I forget precisely what WIFIA stands for, but it's under EPA directly. And it is meant to finance very large projects. So it was put in place to deal with these projects that are 50 million and higher. So it doesn't even get involved. If it's not like a super big project, you wouldn't even go to WIFIA. So WIFIA is good in that it has tons of money. It's bad in that it only can pay for, I think it's 49% of your amount can come from them. And it's not free. It's money you have to pay for. So it's loan money. But it's there, which is like the positive is there is this big chunk of money that you can apply for. And there aren't a lot of other funding sources with like those deep pockets where they have gobs and gobs of money. So no matter what Santa Fe does, I think it's a matter of 2 things. One is phasing the project. So trying to figure out natural phases where what can you do first, second, third, and you may even need as many as, 4 or 5 phases to get the money amount to be reasonable for each phase. And that allows you to kind of go back and ask for more money from agencies because they get allotments every year. So if the cap per year is like 20 million, you can get 20 million one year and a couple years later, you could potentially get another 20 million. So that allows you to get 40, where at the beginning, you probably couldn't have gotten 40. So one option is really thinking through phasing and what potentials there are. There's usually some potential for phasing, but there's not necessarily like unlimited options to phase, because it has to fit together. I mean, it has to work as a, wastewater treatment plant. So you can't like skip important pieces and, we don't put the pump station in, so there's no water flowing or, something like that. So we have to be careful about how the phases are set up. But one thing I think that's important is thinking through phases and how to get the money amount down a bit for each phase. And the second thing is that it will have to be combinations of sources. It will have to be pairing up this with that, with that, with that. And there's also the open bond market that could potentially provide a fair amount of money. But again, that's not free. It has to be paid back. It's usually pretty favorable terms. So as loans go, it's a better, type of loan than many others. But I think, those two are going to be key: phasing and then combining sources. And we're certainly able to help look through. We would not be the ones to help you phase it. That's going to be the engineers that you have. I mean, we can talk to them potentially about the idea of phasing, but we wouldn't be the ones to pick, phase 1, phase 2. That would be the engineers telling you, you could logically do this part, then this part, and then this part, and here's how much each of those would take. But we could help with which of these sources make the most sense for the different phases. And then what we don't have on this table are sources that are more unique to the less infrastructure-y parts. So we talked a bit before about there's resources and infrastructure, and they're kind of two different things, but interrelated. So as you're trying to do work on the river itself, other sources of funding that are not on this table could potentially come into play. So things from like Fish and Wildlife, for example, or some of the forest type funding sources could come into play. They're not generally as big, they're not going to be multi-millions usually, but they can be hundreds of thousands, maybe low million, depending on what you're going to do. But it opens up some more unique sources of funding that potentially could also be explored. I don't think it will help with the actual construction of the treatment plant, but it could help with river restoration or something else that maybe relates to the treatment plant or the discharge or that kind of thing. I think there's some programs that relate to discharges a bit. So again, there can be some other sources that are not on this table that could be looked at if there are unique aspects, more nature-based aspects. Again, that brings in some other funding sources that don't fit the infrastructure, so they're not on our infrastructure table.
Heather, we have a couple questions on the chat. One is Zoe, who had to leave the meeting, would like to get a copy of that list that you put together. So if you could make that available, appreciate it. And then Jordan had a question. Are those federal sources inclusive of funds from bipartisan infrastructure or smart water funding? And I think you may have already answered that, but Darren, you want to?
Generally speaking, it is, because we have the SRF on there, and you get the bipartisan infrastructure law money kind of two ways. The first way is by asking for it through the SRF. So if you were applying to the SRF, you're not applying like separately if you want bill money, you're just applying to the SRF, and it's going to be a combination of bill and non-bill money. And then the other way you access it is by congressional directed spending, which is new since bill was passed. Congress has started just writing things in the bill, taking the money right off the top. And you can argue good or bad whether they should be doing it. That isn't for me to say. That's Congress to decide. So I'm not going to express an opinion one way or the other. It is what it is. That's what's happening. So one option is to go to Congress and say, we have this huge project. Can you fund some of it through CDS, congressional directed spending? We are not allowed to help with the ask. Because we can't use federal money to do that, but there's no reason that Santa Fe can't go directly to its congressional representatives and ask themselves. On the back end, if the money is awarded, we can help there, but we can't help on the front end as the system asks. So we can help with any other funding, we can help. But CDS is unique in that we're not allowed to go to Congress and, request money for anybody or help you do that. But you guys can certainly go to your congressional reps and say, hey, we would like some money for XYZ, and you compete with everybody else in New Mexico, and they decide however they decide. And I don't know what process they use to kind of decide you've risen to the top and we're going to put you in the bill. That's a bit sort of transparent. There's not like a, something you could look at online and say, okay, if the project does this and this and this, it gets funded, because that's not how it works. It's just that congressperson says this rose to the top for me, so I'm going to put it in the bill. So those are kind of two ways you get the bipartisan infrastructure law money. And then there is some money left over from the, oh crap, what's the fund? It's ARPA money. And everybody has ARPA money, so it would be worth checking to see if the city of Santa Fe has any ARPA money left. Our understanding is ARPA has to be spent by the end of December. So if there is any of that ARPA money, and Ryan, I don't know if we got any information on ARPA for Santa Fe, but if there is any ARPA money left, that is grant money. You can use it on water. And I would recommend you spend all of that if there's any ARPA money left. And that was kind of that COVID, came out of COVID, and they gave a bunch of money to the state, and then the state doled it out to all the cities and counties in the state. So that might be worth checking to see if there's any ARPA money left. It's not going to be gobs of money, but if there is any money, you want to spend it. So maybe it would help with engineering or, some other aspect of the project, if there is any money left in your account.
Any other questions for Heather? And I really appreciate.
It looks like William has a question.
Yeah. What's your question, William?
Well, everything I've heard, the discussion, it's been really good this morning. And it sounds like we can move forward. But the problem is that right at the beginning of the year, 2 county commissioners met with the mayor independently. And the mayor said, I am not getting into a regional wastewater system, a regional water system, a regional utility system like, Albuquerque Bernalillo has. I think like the regional jail, the regional landfill, the regional dispatch, all of those were mistakes. And therefore I'm totally against regional. And
wow.
So we need to really sell the guy on a package, or maybe the city council can override him.
We'll figure that out. That's a political issue and never an easy one to take on. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, in some cases, the regional maybe doesn't make sense in other aspects. And I'm not familiar with jails or anything else because that's not my world. But I know in water, we have some really good examples like the Albuquerque and the Lower Rio Grande example. We certainly do have a failure. CRUA, if anybody's followed CRUA, it's the Camino Real Regional Utility Authority. And CRUA has not been successful. But it isn't because it's regional. There's a whole host of other reasons that we don't need to go into today because it would take the rest of our meeting, for which CRUA has not been successful. They certainly had the pieces to be successful, but they didn't hire the right personnel and they didn't do the right things, so they haven't been. But we do have other examples of, within the state of entities who are going that direction and have been really successful. So if the, if there's any interest, we could always try to get some of these examples in front of them.
Okay.
So they can see what's been done in the past.
Heather, again, thank you very much for your very informative presentation. And I want to move on to Miss Ewing. But before we start, I have to ask her how her geranium's doing on her porch. that was being blown around by the winds last we talked?
It's doing well. I repotted it in a bigger pot that's heavier, and I put some rocks in there, so it's heavier still. So it's doing great. I'll send you a picture.
So would you tell us about the water quality testing program you're putting into place?
You bet. So I'm working. So John Dupuy is going to talk about the wastewater reclamation facility improvements that are underway at present. But Hazen is doing a lot of that work, the wastewater engineers. I'm involved just a little bit as far as doing some PFAS sampling that's, not related exactly to the EPA issues, but that work is part of that project, and that's what I'm going to tell you about now. We have DB Stevens, my old company, Danny B. Stevens. They're doing the field work on this sampling. We're working together on this project. So what's happening now? Well, let me just give you historic information. You probably all are aware, but just to cover it, the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility, historically, they were doing land application of sludge. That's a very common disposal method for sludge, nationally. That's what a lot of wastewater facilities do. That practice has been discontinued, but that was done for decades. So after that was discontinued, there was some soil and hydromulch that was applied to the ground surface in that land application area. And so that's material that was brought in, with the idea that you would seed and have something, maybe, grow there. So what's happening now is there's a lot of, talk about PFAS regionally, and there are a number of different studies that are in different stages to try to characterize, the contamination regionally. Where is it coming from? Are there more than one source? How far has it gone? What will be done about it? And so the city is doing some sampling, and that is at the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility. There are existing monitor wells at the site, at the Paseo Real site. There are 7 monitor wells, and those are to do with, the facility has a couple of discharge permits with the Environment Department. So those wells, get sampled for what's required under those permits, which is not PFAS. But we are doing PFAS sampling in those monitor wells. We did one event in August of last year, and there were detections in one of the monitor wells. They were relatively low. We were concerned the discharge hoses on those monitor wells were not a good, they could have some, PFAS is in a lot of things, and it's really easy to contaminate your samples. So you have to be really careful when you're collecting samples to make sure you don't introduce, PFAS into the samples. But anyway, the discharge hoses that were on those monitor wells during that initial sampling event were potentially not the best selection for material. So those have been changed so that we can be sure that we're getting good information. The method, we don't need to get into a big analytical method discussion right now, but the method that was used in August is different than what we're doing with the new sampling events. And why that is a new method was finalized since that original, that earlier, it was a draft method at the time. And we used what the DOD had been using. We were doing projects for Kirtland and, well, for NMED, but looking at Cannon and Holloman Air Force bases, we use the same method as was being used for those projects for that August sampling. But now what's happening is 4 quarters of groundwater monitoring of those 7 monitor wells. The first event was in June, late June. We don't have the results yet. Then there will be events in September and December and March. And so in each of those 4 quarters, we're collecting samples from the 7 monitor wells. We're running them for its EPA method 1633, which is the method that was recently finalized. And that includes 40 PFAS compounds. So we will get that information before terribly long for the June sampling that was done. And then presently we have a soil sampling event also planned. So the question is there PFAS contamination underneath the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility? That's what we're trying to determine. And so the soil sampling event, that was completed the first week of July. And so that also we're waiting on the data for, and reports will be issued, for each of these events. But that event that occurred in July, we collected, and we as Danny B. Stevens did the field work, 11 samples from 2 to 3 feet below ground surface. So why we selected that depth is we wanted to get underneath any soil hydromulch material that was brought in. We want to sample the native dirt. And then we also wanted to get below the depth of what the sludge disposal, was on the surface. And then also we wanted to be able to collect those samples by hand. It's a lot more expensive to bring a driller out to do, deep sampling. If we see detections in these 2 to 3 foot samples, then in those locations, it would be beneficial to go back and go deeper. But this initial sampling is 2 to 3 feet below grade to see what we have at that depth across the site. We also collected 1 sample and a duplicate sample of the surface materials because we want to make sure that, what was brought in didn't bring in some sort of contamination as well. So I can share a map if you want to see, but just to overview, the monitor wells are across the whole site. The soil sampling locations were selected to get all around the site. And just to summarize, we did that 1 event, groundwater sampling, last August, but now are doing 4 quarters, 1 of which is complete, waiting on the data, and the soil sampling event also complete, waiting on the data.
Amy, how about the river testing below the wetlands?
I have not been involved with PFAS sampling of the river.
But how about for E. coli?
Carl and I collected a couple of samples of E. coli. One was of the outfall. Obviously, that's being sampled quite often, right, for E. coli, but we wanted a comparison. E. coli samples, E. coli data is extremely variable, so it's hard to, any couple of samples that you collect, even from the same location at the same time, there's going to be variability in those samples. But we wanted to have an idea of what is the E. coli count down, further downstream. And Carl, I don't have those numbers handy, but it's much less, downstream. We went downstream on private property, downstream of the wetlands, to see what the comparison was of E. coli in the river.
Yeah. And going forward, are you going to continue that type of testing?
Possibly, I expect so. So that relates to the wastewater administrative compliance order that the city received from EPA that has a lot of requirements for all these, improvements that are underway and sampling and things. And so as a part of that work, in addition to all the wastewater conditions and improvements, there's a couple of requirements in there that do relate to river sampling, and that is looking at E. coli and dissolved oxygen especially, at 3 locations. So not the location and not the outfall sampling, that's all in there too, but that's related to the wastewater plant efficacy. But the river sampling that's listed in there is 3 different locations that the Surface Water Quality Bureau monitors. And that, so that sampling is included in the administrative compliance order. The city responded to that order, and now we wait until the city and the EPA have, had a hearing and do all of the steps that happen on that compliance order. But that was included in there, and I do anticipate that that would happen. And that was calling for monthly sampling of the river for just those. So PFAS is not a part of that at all, right? This is E. coli and dissolved oxygen, and I think nitrogen and phosphorus also. So monthly sampling for a period of 2 years, and then they also had a couple of more intensive 24, multiple day, 24-hour. You would have you would put sondes in the river to collect like hourly data for DO. So I can keep you posted on that. Nothing's scheduled at this time as far as just getting the, through the coordination between the city and the EPA on that compliance order. But right, Daniel B. Stevens would do all that field work as well as the plan for that work once it gets approved.
Cool.
Amy,
Any
what
questions?
exactly, sorry, Carl. What exactly are you testing for? What are you looking at?
So what we were really talking about is PFAS contaminants. So we're looking at, those are the man-made forever compounds, it's been in the newspaper quite a bit. So we know that there's PFAS. So these are compounds that come from a variety of things, but potential sources could be sludge, like Heather was talking about, some places in the nation, depending, especially wastewater facilities that have a lot of industrial customers, depending what your wastewater is that's coming into your plant, you can have a lot of these contaminants in that wastewater. Santa Fe doesn't have a lot of those types of industries, but that is a potential source for PFAS, which is why the city's doing the PFAS sampling to ascertain, is there contamination at the, area where sludge was historically land applied on the property of the wastewater facility. So we are collecting, the city, I'm working for the city, and we're collecting groundwater and soil samples to look at PFAS in groundwater and soil at that facility only.
Any other questions? Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate this. And I've appreciated getting to know you a little bit better too over the last few weeks. It's been very educational for me. And Mr. Dupuy has been able to join us. We appreciate that. Little known fact about Mr. Dupuy: he was the captain of the LSU men's volleyball team for 3 years. Some time ago. And if you've ever watched college volleyball, it's a serious sport, folks. And so he was the captain. With that, I introduced Mr. Lee. Tell us what's
Thanks,
going
Carl.
on with the plant
I haven't
now.
had that introduction before. And I appreciate being able to attend. Thanks for inviting me. And also, pardon my tardiness. And I'm very open to any questions. I can give an overview of maybe some of the work at the wastewater plant. I think that's likely.
Yeah, that would be great. What's going on now?
Sure. There's 2 main efforts. Or one effort, we call it the Emergency Administrative Order Project. Prior to the administrative order from NMED, we had an administrative order from EPA. It didn't have a fine. And it had, a component that required not only correcting something in the interim, but ensuring its ability to meet discharge requirements long-term. And so I've really leveraged that so that this emergency administrative order project isn't just something for the interim, And the two components I was beginning to describe are like equipment and technical capabilities of the facility, as well as the culture of the facility. And so I'm going to talk about those two separate in terms of what we're doing with both. In terms of the equipment, we've had Carollo there for some extended period of time. They're doing a master plan. Ultimately, I think there's some meaningfulness in what they're able to provide, but also having a second opinion. And I'm very open to anyone that has any great idea. We're going to listen to it, and we're going to do some meaningful component of it that is able to be intertwined with everything else that's happening. So I don't turn down advice is basically what I'm trying to say. And Hazen has brought a technical team that I haven't seen the capacity of anywhere I've been, or any consultants that I've worked with before, including microbial analysis. So they have like a operations and microbiology experts in-house that they deploy to help people, including like bringing operators, and they work there full time if necessary. So changing the culture, kind of just tying the two together a little, it gives someone for people to emulate, you know, like a mentor or something of that effect, as well as very standardized processes. So the technical piece is we don't have instrumentation really to run the plant like they would, where they have a lot of data that is collected regularly, and you have process, we call them APEs. So it's area, process, and I'll remember what it is before the meeting's over. But the concept behind it is every process throughout the treatment plant has a target. And if you're not meeting your target, then there's a description of controls that you can implement to adjust the operation of that process to then get closer to the target. And it's documented, it's clear, and it's taught regularly, and it uses instrumentation in a way where if you're trying to look at something after the fact, then all that information is logged. So you can actually do better troubleshooting when you bring on someone to help address a unique occurrence. And so the logging piece is also important because currently there is a lot of waiting until you can see the problem versus watching the transition of it go from the target to the problem place. And so if you go to the Bugman Direct Diversion, the Canyon Road Water Treatment Plant, or the county's Santa Fe County Water Reclamation Facility, so their wastewater plant, all of those have SCADA with the entire facility on SCADA. Like everything's monitored, everything's recorded, and the way they operate is they operate from a panel where you see these trends of certain metrics that your target metric. And when you see it drifting away from the target, you do something immediately. You don't wait till it gets bad. And so that's something that hasn't existed at this facility until aeration improvements. I think it was 3 to 5 years ago, where that was brought on to a SCADA system. And now there are probes that measure dissolved oxygen. And so the blowers that produce the air and put it into the aeration basin, they're actually on a control loop. They like shoot for that target constantly, and they adjust constantly. So that mindset applied to the whole plant is what we're trying to get to. The only other area that has that capability is the digesters. So it's because the digesters are new. They put them on the SCADA whenever they did that improvement. And so those are the only two pieces of the entire plant that someone could run from the panel. And so you can't run the plant from the panel. So they're still really in this old school mindset where they walk around and they just look, is it bad? And then maybe once an hour, that's when they can make a control occur, not minute by minute when they're watching everything from the panel. So that's going to be a huge transition. It's going to require lots of training. And that's after all of the instrumentation is deployed. So right now, Hazen is doing some verification of what instrumentation is needed. So creating like the needs list. And then we'll develop the capability with them to have the contractor who's on site doing some other work, have that added to their scope. And then ultimately the follow-up with the training so that staff can actually understand how to use a different way of running the plant to their benefit. So, big picture is technical and instrument capability and culture. Those two combining enables us to run this older facility like a newer facility, and it's training for whether we do a full reconstruction or a complete rehab. But those are the longer term end goals. And I originally was focused, like when I first got at the city, on both of those. Ultimately, I have good mentors, and they were like, John, you can't just build something new and then think that the guys that are running the old one are just somehow going to know how to run the new one. You got to go train and get them ready and change the culture with what you got. And so until they can run the old facility like you want them to run the new facility, you shouldn't be giving them the new facility. And so is a time where, I had to shift the mindset, but it was because they were just 100% right. And so that's the focus currently.
Okay, and I do want to introduce Michael Dozier, who is the head of the wastewater division of the Public Utilities Department. So hi, Mike, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Okay. Other questions for John? Maury?
I've got a quick one, and thanks again, John, for being here. How would you see communication, especially with downstream users, as being part of that cultural shift where you can kind of institutionalize those best practices to make sure that as things do come up, community members are informed in real time, especially those folks having the discharge flow through their properties or adjacent properties?
There's a program called ISO 14001. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. The labs use it. I see Darren giving a thumbs up. That's what I want to emulate. And ultimately, how I chose or felt confident to agree to bring Hazen on was I went and did research on the team members that they were proposing. One of them is TJ Lynch. I literally got the city to give me this subscription to Ancestry. I don't know if you know, but like Ancestry has this incredible ability to have newspaper research. So they use it for one thing, but it's somehow in the industry, they've like gathered up all the newspapers, and they've given access to, with one subscription, to all these newspapers. And that's what he did. He implemented ISO 14001 in his community where he was working, and he's retired. They have, for multiple extended periods of time, continued to get awards ever since that implementation. And so to me, like, that's the track record and he came in, he was headhunted and hired whenever a facility was failing. And so the city was in the newspaper. It's a very similar story. And so I wanted someone with a track record. And then the other one was Charlie Leader, or Charles Leader. He was the prior wastewater manager at Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water User Authority. And their notification, going back to your direct question, both have a very similar approach. And I don't know if Charlie had the ISO 14001 in mind when he was doing it, but it's very consistent with those concepts. So I had to imagine either whoever advised them did, or they just naturally came to it because it's a good practice. But they have a SOP, real similar to what those apes that I was telling you is like. You have process control documents, and then they say when you go beyond this is when you take these specific actions. And so you can literally Google it. It's Albuquerque, Bernalillo County Water User Authority notification requirements. And it lists the specific humans at each like affected entity. It includes pueblos, it includes government agencies, it includes water users on the river downstream. You know, it has the expectations, and it says very specifically when the thing that you're monitoring that's recorded in your historian gets above this amount, that's what triggers it. And there's like a decision matrix. And so it's all very clear action steps, you know, so it's not a question of like a judgment or something. It's, and whereas now I think we should notify if we're just at a heightened level, not only whenever we're exceeding the discharge limit. And so just having that clearly laid out in a decision matrix, I think is appropriate. And then anyone who wants to be notified, we'd have some change control process to then update that list. And then additionally, I'm asking Hazen because one, I want the support to be easily, the support of others outside of the city to be easily able to access information that is needed to do troubleshooting or root cause analysis. And currently it's a very arduous process. Like we have a lab manager, some of the stuff is still done by hand. It doesn't go directly into a computer. We have guys who walk around and record things. Often it's on a log, not like an iPad that then goes directly into the database. And I think it's going to make it life easier on all the operations staff, as well as enable us to get help more easily, is having that database easily accessible outside of the city as well. And then I'm going to have to work to make as many people warm and fuzzy about us sharing that information, because I think that's where we need to get to. But it's also like, you don't want to do information overload, because ultimately you want it to be a clear understanding with the community. What do these things mean? And what should I or should I not do, depending on those, not just give them a bunch of information that they don't understand or know what to do with. So that is something I don't know how to do. I haven't done that before, just being honest. But it's, again, what mentors to me have critiqued me on is like, I was like, no, we should just make all the information open. And they're like, well, how's a layman gonna know what to do with that? And I'm like, okay, good question. You know, so part of that I feel is like, I have to have that interaction with the community, and then it's an education process for both of us. So that is in the works, but that is not the direct focus, just being honest. The direct focus is getting the plant in compliance as quickly as possible. And I'll let Michael talk about some of the recent improvements, like with filtration, and others I may be forgetting about.
You want to take it, Mike?
Yep. So currently we've done multiple pieces to try to get the plant not necessarily just in compliance, but working more favorable to keep in compliance. Now, chemical addition is not something that we're on a norm ever used to in wastewater. We try to stay away from chemical addition as much as possible. But two of the situations that we're dealing with, one being filamentous bacteria causing issues with settling, we did have to start adding a chemical, which is chlorine, not something too outrageous. It's not anything that hasn't been already added to water in previous years in the world, or even here at this plant. So we're actually adding the hypochlorite to our return activated sludge so that we can kill off as much of the filamentous bacteria, which is bad bacteria we don't want, that creates havoc in settling is our main issue with it. To minimize and get rid of it, the issue that we end up having with that though is we also kill our bacteria that we want to work. So it's a really moderated, trying to keep track of it, keeping only the dosage required going in each day. But that has created a lot of help with the settling. Now, the secondary thing we're adding is a flocculant that is helping also do the same
Hey,
thing.
Michael, before you transition, can I just maybe ad lib on that one item? So I mentioned earlier, I think it was maybe before you jumped on, that the microbial analysis that Hazen, the capability for microbial analysis that Hazen brought to the table is something that is pretty advanced. You know, they sent it, there's probably like, from my understanding, talking with the lead from Hazen, there's like 4 people across the country that are really good at this. Their group is one of them. There's another group in Denver, and I don't know where the other 2 are, but he had mentioned that there's 4. So,
and with Hazen too, literally the person that wrote the book on the bacteria and how to deal with it works with Hazen. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like I asked him, what is the reading material? Like, I want to educate myself. Can you, whatever it is that I should be reading? And so they sent me a couple different ones, and the one that I ended up liking the most, I'll bring it back to them, and they're like, yeah, he wrote that one. And I looked at the author and I was like, oh, it's the same guy.
And it's funny because it's literally like the Bible to us of figuring out filamentous bacteria. Like John saying, oh yeah, I got a copy of it. I'm like, this one? This is exactly what we go by too. So yeah, it was a big selling point too, to have Hazen being one of the ones that is, I mean, they're out there getting the right information, putting out the good information to operators and plants all over the world. And it's nice to have someone that, you know, you can turn around and we can actually call people that wrote that book and say, hey, what do you think with our situation? So very, very nice of Hazen was a piece of that.
So that filamentous bacteria, amongst like 17 specifically identified, like the gentleman who is working for us that also was an author on that book, he was describing how whenever they were discovering them, like there was just too many, and they were noticing the distinctions between them. So it was like a unique one. So they just went to a numbering system. So like literally it's like, they're like showing us these slides, and then like, here you have this one, here you have this one. And like, some of them are just a number. And I'm like, man, I got a lot to learn, but like to the extent that, you know, the technical people just resorted to numbers, and it's kind of like, well, that just goes to show you it's not something that, and like literally I haven't really heard it used significantly. You know, like I'll hear, you don't want Microthrix. It's like one of the bacteria that is filamentous that Michael's talking about, and it's very common understanding that you don't want that. But like to have people actually do samples, look at it under a microscope, identify them, which requires a very specific dyeing technique so that you have contrast, so that those stand out and not others. And so that's this process. Just doesn't really happen very often. So it was really cool, really helpful. Identified that we'd have to do this chlorination to kill off those so that we can get settling on the blanket in the secondary clarifiers, so that the particles that are going over the weir can be suppressed. So they don't get into our filters, clog the filters, or go through the filter and get into our UV, and then make the UV ultimately not as effective, and then having E. coli and other things not effectively disinfected with the UV. So I hope that kind of helped elaborate on that one and why it was important, and how it connected to what we were talking about earlier about the support from Hazen.
So moving on from that one, the flocculant is just very basic. It just grabs sludge, makes it bond, makes it get heavy and settle. That's all we're trying to accomplish with it, is just settling to get a little bit more clarity from the water, so that when it does pass to the UVs, the UV is more effective the lower the turbidity. We also have added a pressurized sand filter system that is a rented system for now. We put it in to treat up to 5 million gallons of water a day. It is working very well. It has dropped the turbidity significantly, so the UV is more effective. And we have reconditioned 2 older gravity sand filters that are at the facility already, and they should be actually online by mid-August. They should be online.
And just to kind of elaborate on that, like I like to call it the belt and suspenders, you know, so even though we want to get process control in line with our target, and then the settling should be very effective in the secondary clarifiers, so that what goes to the filter is already a low turbidity. There's always problems. Sometimes it could just be maintenance. So one event is that we will have to take down an entire aeration basin to fix some of the diffusers that are damaged. Literally, the diffuser was floating around in the oxidation ditch, and then we had to fish it out, and we're like, all right, that's the problem. Let's go close off that section. We know we're getting less air there. Maybe we can add air in this other place. But to repair it, you literally have to drain the entire basin, and that's your treatment capacity. So that is going to cause catastrophic down process issues. You know, so the what gets passed to the secondaries isn't as treated. What then has to settle out is more significant, which may not be able to occur. And if you don't have your microbiology in control to where it's the most ideal microbes that you're dealing with, then that's exacerbating it. And then what goes to the filters is a much higher turbidity than you would want. Well, even if all that happens, how do we still ensure that we can meet our requirements? And that's why I say the belt and suspenders. So these additional filters, we shouldn't have to have most of the time, but whenever we need them, they'll be there. And until we can get the plant where it's being, all the processes are at their optimal, that's saving us. And that's the intent. Currently, even though we're getting this low turbidity, we've solved the filtering problem, even whenever other processes are out of whack, we are having issues with our UV. So now that the UV can be effective, we have to, it's an old system. We already have the project to replace the UV in design, but the design and construction timeline is 3 years from whenever I first got here. So that's too late. So we're working to find replacement parts on as much of the equipment that we can. And we're doing individual bank testing of the UV's effectiveness to identify which ones need those parts, because they are hard to get. The manufacturer no longer manufactures them. So it's more like secondary market suppliers. And so they aren't always exactly what they say they are. And so a lot of it's working through how to validate that what we're installing is performing the way it should. And so Hazen has helped us with that as well. And that's the current focus now that we have the turbidity low.
John, what are the plans for a new plant?
Say again.
What are your plans for a new plant?
Ultimately, I think a new plant is overly meaningful for numerous reasons, but I have to get public buy-in because across the board, because this is a significant cost. The current estimate for a new plant versus a complete rehab is 120 million versus 360 million. Every bit I can move forward up to that 120 means that either option is still open. You know, I need the 120 million to do the complete rehab, and I need the 120 million to do the new construction. So either way, we've moved forward with Clean Water State Revolving Fund to provide that funding. That was brought first to governing body 2 weeks ago, and last night before the power went out, item number 18, which I was there to answer questions about, was the public comment for the approval. There has to be an ordinance to issue debt against the revenue of the enterprise fund. So that's what the Clean Water State Revolving Fund needs to be able to then issue the loan. And so it's once that item is passed, 1 month time period, because it is an ordinance, before it can become effective. And then it would be subsequently voted on. So the first one is really public comment. 1 month later, we have a vote. There is no one that showed a lack of support for it, even though they may have been very critical and wanted, you know, specific questions answered, which is appropriate. So I have a high confidence level that's moving forward without question, that we'll have that funding available, but we're waiting on our master plan to then provide for us more up-to-date cost estimates on the two options of complete rebuild versus reconstruction, and the advantages and disadvantages like list. And ultimately, I think there are advantages that prepare us for the future. You know, like it's not future proofing, but often that's said. I think nothing is proofed. It's just less risk, future risk reduction. And that's a benefit that we know we need because of everything we're seeing changing already in terms of the increasing requirements. There's a concept in EPA regulations called anti-degradation. So you can't let your process degrade over time, but whenever it comes for your new permit renewal, even if there's a higher standard or a more stringent standard for any particular contaminant and its discharge limit, if your equipment can't treat to that, as long as you don't let your equipment degrade, they will allow you to have this reduced discharge limit that isn't the target discharge limit. And to me, that really holds the industry back. But the reason why it's there is because they don't want to have unnecessary expense put on communities that can't afford it. And what I want to try and accomplish is to show that we can afford it and that we should treat to the river standards, even though we have the potential to utilize anti-degradation paths. And so I don't know if that's something people have. I haven't really tried to explain that concept to many people, so I don't know how well it's received, but maybe if there's like just a general nod or something, if that was understandable, or do I need to explain it anymore?
I think it was understandable.
I've got a question here. So why? So I've listened to the whole thing. And we've brought this up to you numerous times to put in a constructed wetland which is inexpensive and will deal with some of these issues. Why has that not happened?
I wouldn't say that it isn't happening. So we've applied for a grant. It was aquatic ecosystem restoration grant. And we got news recently that we didn't receive it. They're going to give us feedback. I intend to apply again. And we engaged with Aaron English on what that would look like and doing it as part of that project, at least getting the design for it. But ultimately, there isn't a lot of recognition for the treatment that it provides in our permit process. And to the extent that it isn't meaningful or that it is meaningful, I think it is. So I think you have a great point. But the initial focus would be something that the regulatory agency directly recognizes so that we can be in compliance, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do more. And
Well,
so
we
I think that's in
happen
the
to
more
have-
category.
Sorry, John, but we happen to have with us Erin English, who does precisely these things. There she is. So
Yeah.
Perhaps you should listen to her.
They've had many conversations.
Yeah, that's right, Bobby. We've had many conversations. I don't think there's any issue there. Yeah.
Any questions for John? And I want to apologize for Erin for overbooking this meeting. And she has been most gracious in saying that she'll be around for the next one. So, any other thoughts, concerns, questions? One of the things.
Quick question,
Go
has
ahead.
the Peaks to Rio ever been presented publicly?
Yeah, Carl, we did hear back a few meetings ago, we did run through that Peaks to
And
Rio concept.
it's on the Watershed Association website, the recording of that presentation, so I can put the link to the page in the chat.
And so, Bobby, I don't know if you've seen that, but that was what felt overly meaningful to work toward accomplishing. And ultimately, there's limited funding, so from ratepayers directly, but there is significant available funding from other sources that I think could help to accomplish it. And so we're making every effort to achieve that funding.
Okay, folks. Anything else for today? I want to conclude with one of the things that I've been doing a little research. There's a grant coming up, but I don't think I've even told you, John, yet. But it is a watershed management group grant, which gives funding to create a watershed management group. And it's something that involves all of the stakeholders as well as the state, the city, the county, but it becomes a very powerful entity in terms of grants applications. And so that's one of the things I think we should start looking at as a possibility. It just makes us much more powerful in terms of going before anybody in terms of requesting funding. So that'll be a topic for our next meeting, and we can discuss that at greater length, and I'll be able to provide more information. Again, thanks to everybody today. I think, Amy, you were great. John, thank you so much. Heather, you were wonderful as always. Ryan, appreciate you in terms of getting us some information that we didn't know. Chris, welcome, and we look forward to working with you in the future. John, Chris is with a group that's going to help Southwest Environmental Finance Center be able to. You want to tell John what you do real quick, Chris? We'll close.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can plug in. I work for Quantified Ventures. We're a climate finance focused organization that works across the West, actually across the United States, but I'm focused in the Colorado River Basin, and I consider everything New Mexico to be part of that basin. I have a sweet spot for New Mexico. Went to school there. We drive dollars to restore treatment facilities, drinking water, infrastructure, nature-based solutions, climate resiliency, all the things. And then something that Heather had mentioned very early, working with her team, the stacked funding and financing solutions, phasing these things out, because $300 million is a lot of money, but over time we help organizations and teams kind of leverage the most amount of capital and drive these projects into reality, as opposed to just plans of plans of plans. So yeah, pleasure to meet you.
Same. And just for clarification, Carl, you're already engaging with Chris so that we can start making some progress?
Actually, Southwest is already engaging with him.
Great, okay.
Yeah,
I just
they're
wanted
one
to
of
make sure
our
that connection was being made.
on the bill project, so we have access to them to help any of the communities that we're working with, and we thought Santa Fe was a really good option because you guys do have a much more complicated funding scheme potentially than a lot of other places. So we thought this would be a really good place to pull them in and use their expertise. And then Carl, I just want to mention too, that as you're moving forward with your other application, if you need assistance, just let us know if anything comes up when you're trying to work on that application. I think that sounds like a great idea to try to get some money to, form a group like that to help you guys manage the watershed. So again, if you need any help, just let us know.
Thank you.
I do think we have a few examples in New Mexico. I think when I was at the county, there was one, like, we'd get requests from the Santa Cruz area. Water users, I think there's, the county would donate money every year.
Cool. We'll do some research. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. I always think there are opportunities that ahead of us that we need to work together to achieve. And I look forward to working with all of you because it's time to make this happen. And I think we've got the right players and the right people in the right positions. So thank you so much to everyone. This will be a united effort and we look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
Friday Eve.
Hey, Heather. Oh, she jumped off.
Oh, no, I'm still here.
Oh, I was hoping that I could just get you for a few seconds.
Sure.
There was something that Commissioner Green talked